Okay, so we've done some navigation stuff. We've looked at the UI. We've even looked at how we can actually select an object in different components, so like edge, face, and vertexes. Now what we're going to do is actually have a look at how we can bring stuff into the scene and do a little bit of basic modeling. Now this obviously isn't a model along. I'm not expecting people to produce this at all. This is just if you want to have a go. But it also just shows you some of the tools you can use, so you can actually go in there and just start making a mess and breaking Maya a little bit. Okay, so how we can create objects, how do I bring stuff in? So number one, we'll always need to start off with something called a primitive. Now, a primitive is a basic geometric shape. Things like, if we have a look at our little frequently used tools up here in our modeling shelf, these first 7 are actually primitives. So we've got a spherical primitive, sphere, polygon cube primitive, a polygon cylinder primitive, polygon cone primitive, a polygon torus, which is like a donut shape primitive, a plane, which is a single plane, and a disk, which is a cylindrical disk. Now we can absolutely click these. These are really, really nice to use, and often like 9% of the time we're going to use these. But we can also come up here at the very top where we've got create. I'm going to actually create out of here. So inside this create menu, we're going to load of things. You know, we've got cameras and lights and NURBS, which are a fun little thing that we don't use that much, but they're interesting. But we can go to the polygon primitives, and then we have a list of all our polygon primitives here we can use. You can see there's a lot more inside there, like there's footballs, prisms, platonic shapes, pyramids, pipes, which are like cylinders but with holes in the middle. Really, really cool. Now, by default, if I was just to, so I've opened up Maya for the first time, I've decided, okay, I'm going to make something using a cube. If I just come up here and click cube, or in fact, I'm going to come up to create and come here and click cube, you get this very small version in the middle of the scene being created. Now, remember what I said in the first video, that each one of these little squares is a centimeter. This is a 1 centimeter by, this is a centimeter cubed cube. So that's tiny. That's going to be really, really annoying for me to work with. A couple of things that are happening. One, it's really small. So if I want to use this inside a real world scale project, I'm going to have to do a lot of work. But also, if we think of this grid as our workspace, as our desk, it's currently going through our desk, which is fine. I guess I could move it up and stuff, but it's a pain. So there's a couple of things we can do. Well, there's one thing we can do. And if you want to work like that, if you find that more comfortable, go for it. But for expediency, I like to come into the Create menu, Polygon Primitives, and turn on Interactive Creation, which is at the bottom of the Polygon Primitives menu. I'm going to turn that on. And now if I was to say, click the cube, so I'm going to come up here instead to click my cube, we're going to get, and I'll change the background for this as well, so it's a bit more visible. I'm going to click cube, we'll get a menu, I get a little message saying, drag the base on the grid, then pull up for height. So I'm going to click and drag on the grid. So I'm making basically my footprint of my cube, and then I'm going to click and drag up to my height. So there you go. That's cool. And then I can start working on this, which is totally cool. And also, it's made it on top of the grid, so I won't have to move stuff up later on. The importance of making sure we've got stuff on top of the grid is that the grid is the 0 point, the middle of the world for every game. So every game engine, every other software, whatever. If I make something which is going through the middle of the grid, say if I make a character and the middle of the grid is going through the middle of the stomach, as soon as I import that into, say, Unreal, my character is going to be standing halfway through the floor, which isn't great. Okay, so that's cool. I can make a cube like that, which is super, super great. Each one of these will give you a different kind of way of creating. So if I click the sphere, it's going to say drag on the grid, which just makes a sphere. A cylinder looks similar like a cube. Okay, but if I click that cube again, if I hold shift and click and drag, what happens if I make a perfect cube? I make a perfect cube, which is great, especially because I like working from perfect primitives. I like working from like perfect cubes, which is super, super great. And also it makes it on top of the grid. Okay, so that's how you can create objects in the scene, like the basic primitives. Just going to the create menu, finding whatever you want to use, and then using that. We'll go over the theory of what primitive you should use or can use for whatever, because you can literally take a cube like this and turn it into a AAA level game character with all like bells and whistles and details and stuff. I've done it many, many times. Now, one thing I want to show off at this point is the channel box. So on the right-hand side here, the little vertical docked channel box in information here. Now, this is what happens when we have an object selected inside the channel box. So you can see here that we've got at the very top p cube 1, which is also over here in our outliner. And you can see now that in our outliner we've got this one little grey symbol in p cube 1. P cube 1 stands for polycube 1. We've made a polygon, it's a cube, and it's the first one we've made. That's how that works. And this information here is just basically giving me the information, telling me like if there's any translate, which is basically its position in the space. So it's been it's slightly off on the x-axis by like 0.12. The middle of the box is 11.433 units up, and the translated in the z-axis 0.181. And if I was to move any of this, you're going to see those numbers updating, especially just telling you where it is in space. Now, a rotation is obviously at 0, but if I was to rotate this as well, you now see that, okay, I've rotated across the y-axis that amount, and I've rotated across that amount. Okay. Now my scale is set to 1. If I set all these to 0, now my object is in the middle of the world, it's got no rotation, but our scale should always be set to 1 at the very beginning, because if we were to set the scale to 0, it's got no scale. It's disappeared. So our scale should always be 1. But you can, if you want it half the size, you can go for 0.5. If you want it twice the size, you can go for 2. But 1 is like just the default size of our object. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to change my y-axis because I don't want to move it through the floor. I'm just going to change my x-axis to 0, my z-axis to 0, which just means it's in the middle of the world as much as I can make it. Cool. That's awesome. Okay. It's quite a lot of stuff kind of covered then, but it's just about creating the object right there. And once we've got it selected, inside the channel box, we've got the information for it there. And inside the outliner, we've got it's got its slot right there. All right then. So what I want to do, I've been tasked with making a simple pillar for a kind of a Roman bath or something. Okay, so I've got my reference off to the other side of the screen, and I'm gonna we'll go over like methods of approaching how to model stuff, but I'm going from the base upwards. I'm going to build from the bottom upwards, and I'm going to try and keep it all one object. So what we're going to do actually here is try and get our model as simple as possible using only 5 tools, technically like 9, but you've got 5 tools, but you've got like a couple of variations on a couple of them. Okay, so I'm going to make the base of this. So this, I'm looking at my reference, I'm seeing that, my base is a little bit too tall. If this is going to be like a 3 foot by 3 foot kind of base, this is going to be a very, very tall base. So I want this to be a little bit shorter. How can I do that? Well, the simplest way of me doing that is literally just grabbing this top face and pulling it down. So if I grab that top face right there, and I want to push it downwards, so I'm pressing W for my movement tool. I'm just going to push that down, and I'm going to eyeball this. And I can, if I really wanted to, I could be really, really precise with this, and I could get absolute perfection with this, but I'm not really going to bother with that too much. Okay, so I'm going to pull this down, and I think, okay, that's looking good. That's cool. Now what I want to do is I actually want to use our first of our 5 major tools. I'm going to use something called the extrusion. And why am I going to use this? Well, I'm looking at my reference and I can see that it comes in a little bit around here, and then it comes up a little bit as well. So I'm not going to use multiple different objects to do this. I'm going to try and make everything out of one object. So what I want to do is bring it in and then bring it up. But if I if I wanted to scale it in, well, I'm bringing the entire thing in. I don't want to lose this right angle right here. I want to do this instead. Now I did like a quick way of doing it there, but this is basically what I want to create. I want to bring it in and then bring it up like this. This is what I want to do. So how do I do that? How do I do that the old-fashioned way? So again, we're in our polymodeling shelf, and this does exist in the edit mesh drop down as well. But in our most common used poly shelf here, it's the first one right here. It's like a tower on a white base. This is our extrude tool. And if I hover over there, it's going to tell you what it does. There you go. Extrude. Extrude new vertices, vertices, edges, faces from existing spots on the mesh. So, if I just click extrude, just click it once as well. I made this mistake a lot when I was starting off. I used to double click a lot of stuff. So just click it once. You're going to get this little menu appear. Now, a lot of these menus are going to be used, and they're all kind of slightly different depending on what tool you're using. But this is the one for extrusion. So we've got on here, we've got a few different menus. We've got thickness, local translate, offset divisions, and keep faces together. We're only going to be using one or two of these at a time. So what does thickness do? Let's have a play. So I'm going to hover over thickness, and you're going to see that a little icon turns to like 2 arrows. And I'm going to click and drag left and right, and you can see what it does. Pushes up and down, which is cool. Not necessarily what I want it to do, but it's cool. And you can actually see geometrically what it's doing. Instead of me just moving this surface up like this, what's actually happening is it's creating new geometry. It's got an edge. So now I've created an edge going around there, and it's actually made a new geometry at the top. That's not what I want it to do. I want to bring that in. So what about local offset Z? What does that do? It does the same thing. Technically does the same thing. There is a slight difference if you notice the difference what's happening there between just using the thickness. Okay, just keep an eye on like the gimbal, see what's happening there. Let's try offset. Okay, that's what I want to use. Yeah, that's what I want to use. I want to bring it in first. Now you're going to see as well our wireframe. It's being pulled in. We've now got these 45-degree angles, which is super, super cool. We should never really need to delete. If we're being careful, we should rarely need to delete bits of our geometry or bits of our wireframe. It's like the wireframe you can think about as a skeleton. If you start deleting loads of the wireframe just because it might look to you ugly, you start to lose the skeleton, the strength of the object, and it will literally start to collapse. So, right there, all I can do with these offset and decide how far in I want to bring this in. So I'm going to look at my reference and I'm going to think, okay, well it's a large base, but maybe the pillar's like 2/3 the thickness of the pillar. So I'm going to go about there. I'd say right there. Yeah. Oops. Okay. Now I can be a bit finicky with this because I'm literally just clicking and dragging on there. But if I want to be a little bit more precise, I can click inside one of these boxes and actually input a direct number. So if I know I want to bring this in, maybe 5.2, I can literally go 5.2. Or maybe I want to be 4. Or maybe I want to be 4.3. You know, I can have complete control over this. Quite far down the decimal chain as well, so like 4.3. So depending on how big you're working, these decimal points are going to come into really useful. Now, this is a reason why I like working the way I do, making my own object, because working on big objects means you have much more distance on any of like these decimal place kind of movements. They mean a lot on a bigger object. On a smaller object, one decimal place might be actually quite a big, it might make a big change to your object. Okay. So now what we've done is made the little kind of lip there. So I've got like the base stone kind of planned in. That's cool. And I know where I'm going to have this pillar come out of. So I'm like, okay, right. So I'm going to use that extrude again. There's no reason for me to do anything else. So now I can't just drag up because I'm just dragging up like that. I expect him just moving the geometry. So if I want to actually make more geometry coming up, I just click extrude again. And then I can use the thickness to pull it up. And I'm going to bring it up to about where I want it to be. Let's go about there. Okay. So now we've made a very, very basic pillar, which is super, super, super cool. And that's just using extrusion. Now, extrusion is the tool you would use the most in the 3D modeling pipeline. It's the most commonly used tool. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with it, user error stuff. We're not going to go over it in this video, but there's going to be some stuff that happens in the first few weeks where you're going to be making the same errors over and over again. But don't worry, it's easy to fix. Okay. Right, so that's tool 1, extrusion. Tool number 2, so it's all like, they're all on this row as well. They're all here. Maybe one's about here, but they're all about here. So I'm going to skip the next one. I'm going to jump to the third one along what we call bevel. Bevel components create a bevel along a selected edge or face. So what a bevel is, it might be called chamfer in some of the like softwares. Like I think it's called chamfer in Blender. I think it's called Chamfer in 3ds Max as well. But what bevel does, I'll leave it on a little bit here. What bevel will do is if I select a single edge and I hit bevel, which is this little cube with a little white Y in the middle of it, it takes that one edge and splits it into two and creates a new piece of geometry in the middle. Now we get another one of these little boxes. It's a little bit different. So we've got fraction. Fraction is basically the size of that bevel. We've got segments, which is how many. So we've got one segment, so we've got one face in the middle. But then we can increase that and decrease this. Now this is a reason why I was saying before in the last video that your brain does a lot of the work for you. I see so many people putting tons of segments in the bevels because they want stuff to look absolutely perfectly smooth when it's like an in-game object. You know, something like this 12-sided thing here, and I literally have seen people go for stuff like that as well, like 50 sides. You don't need that. If you can get away with that, the human brain reads it as a curve. The human brain doesn't really care. You start to notice it more when you've been doing this for a long time because you'll know kind of the landmarks to look for, but most civilians will have no idea what we do. So they'll just see a curve and their brain will go, okay, that's a curve. So the difference between 4 and 12 for me is negligible. But that's what segments does. Segments does that. Depth, which is a really fun one. So depth is currently set to 1. If I set that to 0, basically it's a transition between two surfaces. Set to 0, there's no transition, it's a flat angle. If I set this to minus, we can bring it in. So it's very, very cool. So these top 3 I use all the time. The other ones, there's not really much they need to be used for. I had never really used them that much, especially not that one. So these top 3 ones are what I'm going to use. So what I'm going to use that for is I'm going to turn this cube shape here, this cuboid, into a cylinder. Crazy, I know. What I'm going to do is grab these 4 vertical edges. So I'm going to hold down right click, go to edge, multi-select going around. So select each one of these going around like that. And I'm just going to hit bevel like that. And I'm just going to decide what the shape's going to be. Now, do I want to try and get a perfect sphere or a perfect cylinder, or do I want to get a more like square? Like, what do I want to do? So I'm just going to put this 0.5, so it's halfway. It should be, actually, no, if I increase that to like 0.6. So like that, yeah, that looks pretty cylindrical to me. And then I can add maybe a segment in. Maybe increase that a little bit. 0.65. So you can see I can really use these number fields to be very, very precise. So that looks okay to me. That looks fine. Now, if we look at what's going on at the very bottom of this, this is me talking about in the last video, talking about we can make end guns, but we can't keep them. We have to fix them. So it's perfectly okay to make them. That's because I've made them here. And with the bevel, if there's something you're going to make with a bevel, it's an end gun. Okay, so where's the end gun? It's right here. This face, all 4 of these faces going around. They're all end guns. And why is that? Well, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided shape. It's 2 above what we want. Now, I'm not going to worry about that because I can fix this. I'm going to show you how we can fix this in a little second. There's a couple of different ways we can fix it, but I'm going to show you one way first. In fact, I'm going to just duplicate this whole thing off for a second because there's a way of fixing it that will kind of ruin what I'm doing here. Okay, but that's the bevel, a super, super cool tool. Super, super cool tool. Now I'm going to jump forward to the next tool, which is literally the next one in line, called the merge tool. So we've got extrusion, the first one, the third one, it was bevel, and then the second one, but the third one in line. Next one is the merge. Now this one is one of the tools where there's 2 different ways of doing the merge because there's 2 different ways it's going to work. And one might be better than the other, or one might not be as good as the other. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I want to solve this stuff here, and all I'm going to do to solve this issue in the bottom here is I'm going to drag these corners, this vertex here, into the corner. So I'm going to, on this side, I'm going to do the old-fashioned, more steps involved way. On the opposite side, I'm going to do the newer and cleaner way, but you can make mistakes if you're not careful. So on this side, what I want to do is I want to snap these two vertexes into their respective corners. Because what I want to have is triangles like this. Now, how do I snap something like that? Very, very easy. V, I hold down the V key. And you're going to see you get a couple of things happening. You got this little icon up here, turns blue. And then the circle in the middle here turns to the square in the middle of this gimbal turns to a circle, meaning that it's looking for something to snap to. And if I just click and drag on this, it's going to snap to the closest vertex to my mouse. So if I can click and drag that, I can actually drag it around the mesh to wherever I want. But it's going to be the closest vertex to my mouse. So if I start dragging it to up close to this, it's going to get closer and closer and snap. And if I start dragging it back towards the corner, it's going to snap. There you go. So it's going to snap. Now it's not merged. This is still a separate mesh. There's still a separate vertex. All I've done is just place two vertexes on top of each other, like that. So it looks okay, but it's not quite. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this corner, like that. So that's okay, but like I said, they're not merged. These are still separate objects. Now that's one thing that I want to avoid, because if things are still separate like this, obviously things can go wrong with the mesh. It's still technically an n-gon, all this kind of jazz. So now that I've done that, what I want to do is just select. I'm going to drag a selection box over just that corner, and then I'm going to hit merge, which remember is that fourth one long. Click that, and then this L box. Now this is very, very simple. Distance threshold. It's basically looking for another vertex that is selected within 0.01 of a unit from itself. Now, because those two vertexes are on top of each other, they just got merged as one vertex. So now that's one vertex, where this is still two vertexes. We'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Click there, oh, like that. I don't need to change this at all. There you go. So now we're good. So that's one way of merging. It's a nice simple way. Now the other way of merging is something called target weld. So what I want to do straight away, this is where things can go a bit messy. I want to make sure I've not got any vertexes selected at all. So make sure I'm in vertex mode and just click off. I don't want to have any vertexes selected. Okay. Right, where does target weld live? Well, it's on our bar here, but it's over here. You've got three icons. You've got this multi-cut tool, which we'll use a little bit, and then in the middle you've got target weld. Target weld tool merges two vertexes or vertices into a single component. Okay, so I'm in vertex mode because I'm dealing with vertexes. I'm going to click on this target weld. Now this is really simple how it works. All I've got to do is click on the vertex I want to move to the point where I want to move it to. Click, and drag. You're going to see that little orange line up here. So I get closer. Click on the vertex I want to move. You can see a little orange dot. Drag to where I want it to snap to. There you go. And what's happened is I've now welded it to that area. This is now one vertex. It's really cool. And then do the same thing again, making sure that I'm not got anything selected. Click and drag. Done. So two different ways of merging. And you might ask, well, why use one over the other? This is just something you're going to have to get used to. And you're going to get used to this through just doing stuff inside Maya. Okay. So we got the extrusion tool, and that's how we made, we brought in the face to make the region for the pillar, and then we extruded the pillar upwards. And then we used bevel. Bevel gave us this rounded surface. And then we used the merge, both merge and target weld, to fix the problems, the n-gons here. But you can see we've got some quads. So now these are all quads, which are good. But then we've got two triangles, which is good. So two triangles, which is good, perfectly fine. All right. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to look at one that is hard to use inside here. just for the purposes of like what I'm making, but I'm going to show you one of our other tools, which is Bridge, which is the second icon in it. Bridge. Create a bridge between two sets of edges or faces. So I've been working away, but I've not been paying attention too well, and I've accidentally deleted some faces there. So I'm working on this side, doing my thing, and I move around. I can see, oops, I've deleted some faces. I want to fill those back in. Number one, what I want to show you is that the insides are black. This is just because it's showing you that this is the back face of a polygon. Front face is grey, back face is black. Dead simple. Now, how Bridge works. This is very, very simple. Just need to be in edge mode. So I've got just selecting my object. I'm going to go into edge mode because I want to deal with edges when I do this. I don't deal with anything but edges when I bridge. Okay, so I'm going to select the two edges I want to basically fill back in, and I'm just going to click Bridge, which is right there. Boom, done it. Now inside it we do have some information on here. Just because this is a flat surface, is one polygon, we don't need to change anything. But and the only other one that's really going to show anything is if I increase division, I can add divisions. But there's taper and there's twist that can do stuff. But because this is such a simple surface, they don't actually do anything. But they will do stuff if we were dealing with a much more complex object. So right there, I did a single just bridge across two surfaces. Nice. Now what about this one here? Well, this is perfectly cool as well. I can do this. I can, again, grab that top two and top bottom. I don't want to grab the ones on the side. I just want to grab the top two, the top bottom, and bridge. Boom. And there you go. Crisis averted. Now the last thing I'm going to do here with this, I'm just going to jump back to the merge tool, because there is technically another merge tool that we can use, but so we've got a massive end on the top here. As you can see, we've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, but 12-sided shape at the top, which is massive. I don't want that. But what I want to do is close this off so it's a nice, simple shape. I also want to get rid of this end on. How do I do that? A couple of different ways I can do that. The easiest way is what I'm going to show you. Okay, so if I just grab this top face here, I could just click this icon here, the fifth one along, which is merge to center, merge a selected component to the center point. And if I just click that now, well, it kind of works, but obviously we've lost that cylinder. It's now turned into a spike, which is not great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate the extrude tool. So I'm going to hit extrude, and then I'm just going to offset it in like that, and then I can hit merge to center like that. Because we've made this new geometry on top here, which is flat, we're not actually losing any shape. Now the other way we could do that is by grabbing all these vertexes at the very, very top and clicking merge. But then we've got to start increasing the size of the distance threshold because they're so big. So I decided to increase it to a point where it definitely wouldn't merge in. But that's that problem solved. Super, super cool. Now the last thing I'm going to do, so we've got the extrude tool, we've got the bridge tool, the bevel tool, and the merge tool. Now obviously the merge tool's got a couple of different ways of doing the same thing, merge to center and target weld. What I'm going to do now is use the add tool to add edges. Now this has got 3 different ways we can add edges. I'm going to show you all 3 of them, but how and where you use them is, there's rules involved technically, but on this is going to be really, really simple. Okay. The easiest one, and the one we're going to be using the most, is called there's 2 called the connect tool. There's one connect, which is rubbish, another connect, which is really good. We're going to be using the connect tool, which lives inside the mesh tools menu. So this connect tool here. The other connect tool lives inside edit mesh connect. We want to use this one. Now, this one is an interesting tool. Pardon me. If I just go to mesh tools and then come down to connect. Now this is annoying because it doesn't live inside our quick access menu here. So this is why I had in the past. I don't use it now just because it's easy for me to have a menu like this, especially when I'm teaching. But when I was doing this professionally, I had this on my own custom shelf. So Mesh Tools Connect. How this works is if I want to put a cut across the middle like this, I need to select all the vertical edges that I'm going to be cutting. I need to select against the direction which I'm cutting essentially. So Edit Mesh, sorry, Mesh Tools, Connect. We get this green light. Now this hasn't actually cut yet. What it's doing is showing me what's going to happen, where the cut's going to be. So if I'm happy with that, I can press W or Enter just to confirm, and now I've got a new edge across there. You know, I've got 2 bits of geometry now. Let's have a closer look at this, because that's not necessarily what I want. What I'm actually trying to do is give myself a region a small region at the top and a small region at the bottom, which I can use for some kind of construction, so that I can actually bring in a region in the middle so it's a little bit thinner, to give myself, just because this is a nice pillar, but it's a bit boring. So I'm going to grab all those edges vertically at the top there, just dragging a marquee box over the top. And I'm going to go to Mesh Tools Connect. Now this is where I can look at the tool settings. So I'm just going to go to the top right here, click on Tool Settings. Now depending on what you're using, you might have a tool settings list which is massive, like loads of different things. Some tools give you very, very few options. So inside the Connect tool, this is what I get. I get a nice little drop down here that's going to show me some hotkeys I can use. But all I'm going to do is use these. So segments. If I hold the middle mouse and drag left and right in the scene, I can increase the amount of segments, which is cool. So depending on what I'm going to use, I use segments. So I'm going to set that to 2, because I know I'm going to use 2 segments. Like that. Slide, if I click on slide now, what slide does, again, middle mouse and then click in the scene, it'll slide the selection up and down the length of your selected area, which might be cool. It might be cool indeed. But what I want is a even split, essentially. If I come to pinch, and I do the same thing, it either brings them closer together or further apart. What I want to do is get the same distance at the top and at the bottom in these new little zones that are going to be produced. Something like that. Oops, I backed it. There we go. And then I can click either Enter or W to complete that, and there you go. So I've made some new geometry. So now I've got an edge at the top and an edge at the bottom. So every time I'm adding a new edge, either through extrude or like what I've just done through the adding edges in, or making it through bevel, what I'm doing is creating one of these edges which gives me a bend. Like I was saying in one of the other videos, you cannot bend an edge. So if you do want to create some kind of curve or some kind of surface change, you need to add an edge to create that change. So that's essentially what I'm going to be doing. So the other ways I can add edges in is I do the same thing. I'll come select this area here. I'll come to Edit Mesh and I will select this one. This only gives you a single edge in the middle of the object, or the middle of the selected area. That's the Edit Mesh version of Connect, which I obviously think is a bit rubbish. There are other things it does, especially if you've got a curved surface, but the cons outweigh the pros for this. So yeah, if I wanted an edge in the perfect middle there, I could go to Edit Mesh and Connect, and bang, you know, it's fine. I don't like that one. The other way we can add geometry is by coming up to our bar here and left of Target Weld. So remember, Target Weld is right here. Just to the left of that, we've got a little scalpel, multi-cut tool, tools to cut, slice, and insert edges on polygons. So got a little scalpel there, and you can see it kind of starts to draw a line in places. If I click on an edge and then click on another edge, you're going to see that I'm creating some polygons or some edges like that. Nice and simple. So that's all well and good, and that's good if you want to make if you need to make kind of like a shape like this for whatever reason, and you go all the way around and whatever. But the best way I found to use this tool is if I just click it, and then if you hold Control, if you hover over a surface, it'll get a preview of what's going to happen. So it's previewing where I can put that edge, and if I say, okay, I want it there, I can click, and it adds an edge in. And this is a really good, quick way of adding in quick edges like this. And if I hold Shift while I do that, it snaps to 10% increments. And of course, this does have its own tool settings as well. That if I was worried about anything, I could go in there and change some stuff. So I could change how many times if I hold Shift it snaps. So I could change it to 5, for instance. So now it snaps to 5% increments. I don't really care. But that's, it just shows you they've got tool settings right there. Now, well, the nice thing about this is if I hold Control, it will show you the preview. And so one of the rules of 3D, one of the rules of modeling is if you're adding in an edge, it's got to go all the way around the object. You can't just end it on some arbitrary edge, because then you create n-gons and stuff. Okay, so that's just another way of adding edges in. Again, we're going to be using this in specific areas, especially, we might be using where we're adding multiple edges in like that, whatever. But that's a couple of different ways we're going to add edges in. Right, cool. So I've designated those two top and bottom bits there. And what I want to do now, so we've done our top 5 tools. Those are all the tools that we've used, that we're going to use. You can build anything with those 5 tools. So what I'm going to do now is continue on using those tools a little bit faster, so I don't need to re-explain anything. But I'm basically going to kind of make this a little bit prettier. So what I'm going to do is come to face mode, grab all these center faces there. I'm going to come to extrude, and I'm just going to use a thickness just to pull it in ever so slightly. So now we've got like a little bit of a lip at the top and the bottom, like that. And then come down to the bottom. This is all well and good, but it looks a little bit boring. So I'm going to do some stuff down here. So if I grab all these edges from the side, I'm going to bevel. Ooh, that's a little bit too much, so I can bring that fraction way down. 0.275, 0.35, 0.35. That's about right, yeah. And then I'm going to add a segment. So we can just, we're going to have a bit of a smoother little transition there, which is nice. But it's okay. It's okay. But maybe I want to get rid of these right angles here. So I'm going to grab these for around there. So I'm grabbing all these. Don't worry about these quick selections I'm doing, because we're going to learn about that in class. Like with me, like being able to select all these different edges really, really fast. Don't worry about that. It's not always about speed at the beginning. Right, so there I'm going to bevel these as well. But I'm just going to bring the fraction in. Maybe add a segment and bring it like that. So you can see I've made a little bit of an interesting little thing going on. Like you see there, I've made some horrible kind of shapes. This is called Z fighting. It's because you've got faces overlapping with each other and stuff, and it's kind of a nasty little shape. What I'll need to do is go around and kind of solve some of this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go around and just solve some of these little geometric errors just by merging those things into the corner, just like we did before. Like that. Yeah, so let's go around each corner and basically go grab that, holding B, sorry. Holding R. Snap. 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 Maya does have this thing where sometimes if you're trying to snap something when you're holding V, it will select the entire thing, and it keeps doing that with me, and it's really annoying, but there we go. There you go. Now, I could have used Tigerbalm for that. I could have absolutely done that, but decided not to. Now, you might sometimes see me when I'm modeling, everything goes really gooey and soft like this. What I'm doing is I'm applying something called Proxy Smooth. I'm basically pressing 3 on the keyboard, so I'm pressing 1 here, pressing 3. I see a lot of people use this to imply softness to a model, which is technically what it's there for, but it's an animation. This is for animation. What I'm using it for is I'm looking for errors in the mesh. And I'll explain all this kind of stuff as we go on, so just don't worry about that at all. Okay, so now I've done that, I've snapped the edges into, or I've snapped those vertexes where I want them to go, but they aren't actually merged in just yet. They're still separate. So I'm going to go select all that bottom section in vertex mode, hold right click, go to vertex mode, and then just click merge. Boom, like that. I'm not going to increase the distance because that might actually accidentally collapse some stuff into each other, but it doesn't like to do it, which is fine. Cool. Okay, so that's looking a little more interesting. I'm going to stick with this section here. So this is looking a little bit too geometric for me. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to add an edge in for a start. I'm going to add an edge there. And then I'm going to just select all the way around. And I'm just going to just scale it out a little bit. And then add another edge in there. And then just, so all I'm doing here is adding edges and then adjusting just adjusting the shape slightly like that. Perfectly cool. And then I'm going to just do some stuff. So I'm going to bevel this edge a lot. So it's a nice round shape like that. Then I'm going to this edge, I'm going to bevel that one. Segment, I'm going to pull that in like that. So now we've got a bit more of an interesting little thing like this. If this was like super high realism, I'd also be beveling very, very slightly across here. But I'm not going to do that because this is a game asset essentially. I'll come up to the top and I'll do something similar. So I'm going to add another edge in. Like that. And then I'm just going to extrude this top section like this. And then basically do the same thing. So make a nice big just like that. Boom. Super nice. So then what else? What else can we do? What else can we do? Okay, let's give us some recesses in here. Either some embossments or some recesses. So what I'm going to do is do some extrusions, but on multiple different faces at the same time. So we don't just have to extrude one bit at a time. So I'm going to grab, like, we don't have to extrude like all connected faces. So I can extrude all these separate faces all at the same time and do the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to extrude. I'm going to use the offset to bring it in ever so slightly. And then extrude again, and then push in, just like that. So now I've got these little indentations, or I could bring them I could even bring them out. Maybe there's plaques or something, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, that's looking good. Now I've solved all the end guns. So no end guns, except for the very, very bottom. What I'm going to do is give myself, I'm going to break my rule before. I'm actually going to go below my grid for now. But I'm going to give myself a wider, more like a square plinth for this section to sit on. Almost like a slab. Okay. So I'm going to keep all as one mesh. I'm going to extrude it from here. So I'm just going to extrude. Then I'm going to offset this outwards. Okay, how wide do I want it to be? Let's go about there. And then extrude again. I use my thickness just to bring that down a little bit. Okay. Now I want to get rid of this little indentation there. I don't want this to be the same. So what I'm going to do is hold Shift, not Shift, V, and just move these and snap them in line. Some of my stuff there. That, which is looking good. And then just a couple of things just to make everything nice and neat. I'm going to bring these into the corner. Again, doing that snapping thing. All right, so there's two things I could do here. I could bring them into the corner like I've just done here, or I could actually bring them into a shape like this. There's no real... Some might argue that this is better than the other. Some might argue that triangles are better than the other. I'm going to, just for the sake of doing multiple different things, I'll do it like this. It all comes down to what you're going to be doing with the mesh and how you're going to be going, how you're going to be using the mesh after this point, because especially if you're going to be going into ZBrush and sculpting it and all that kind of jazz, you need specific kind of layouts. But some people just think that having loads of triangles is a bit ugly, but I don't care. Okay, so that's looking good. And just to add a little bit more believability to it, I'm just going to grab all those top edges. 0.25 and add a couple of segments in there. Maybe one segment. Yeah, that's it. And then at the bottom, now this is one little thing about 3D. If you have an object for a scene where you know you're not going to see the bottom of it, this is going to be like never going to topple over or anything like that, you can take away that face. That could be like just empty like that. You can do the same thing at the top as well. So you could even do something like this. If I know that this is never going to be pulled over, it's going to be a permanent shape, it's never going to be visible at the very top or bottom, I can take away those faces because it's going to be taking away data, information. It's going to be making it a little bit lighter, you know, it's going to be cleaner. It's what we call optimization. Now, if we were going to see the top of this, we'd obviously make sure that we were keeping that cap. At the bottom here, we basically do the same thing. We just cap it off. I'm going to do a dirty cap like that, but you could make it a little bit cleaner. Boom. And right there, that's our object. There's a couple of other things I can do. I'm not going to bother doing them in this video, but there's a couple of other things I could do about fixing up some of these hard edges we're getting across the edges there. Some of it doesn't look super pretty in some areas. I can make this look a little bit nicer, but I'm not going to bother doing that. But from a single cube comes a pillar using 5 tools, and all the tools are in this little bar here. Well, besides the connect tool from here. Very, very simple. Now, if you want to, you know, make something like if you're just doing like that, go for it. You know, totally go for it. Or like one thing I would recommend is literally just making a thing, making a cube, a prism, and just kind of go in there and start smashing around a bit. You know, just start making a mess, having fun with the tools, getting used to navigating, moving around, selecting, seeing what happens if you do whatever. Follow some tutorials or whatever. Oh, the last thing I was going to show you, so why I pulled this guy off before. And it's about adding edges. So what I've done here is I made those triangles going into the edges to solve that problem. What I could also do is using that multi-cut tool, I could also, instead of bringing these edges into the corner, I could just pull an edge round like that. And that solved the same thing. So now what I've got is a bunch of quads and triangles, but no end cuts. And that's all I've funny. Cool. But that's everything. That's the 3 videos. That should give us enough information to, you know, start to get into Maya, have a play, have a mess around. I'll bring this back on so I can remember some stuff. And yeah, these videos are a bit longer. Well, these videos are a bit quick, and this one's obviously about an hour long. But it's all about just getting in, getting used to tools, getting used to the way that Maya looks. You know, going in, having some fun, breaking Maya a little bit, so that when we get into class, we don't have to laboriously learn about Maya, laboriously learn about all the different things. As soon as we can get past that, everything else gets much easier and a lot of fun. Now, I keep saying this as well, I will not lie, 3D is very dry at first. When you first start learning 3D, it can feel like, oh my god, this is the most boring thing in the world. And unfortunately, it is sometimes just all about looking at grey boxes. But 3D is an incredibly useful tool to use, even for 2D artists. You might be thinking, oh, I just want to be 2D. Why am I learning 3D? The, the, the uses of 3D in 2D are amazing. You can use it to make, very, very simple cityscapes. You can use it for lighting practice or lighting passes in the 2D piece. It's gonna, if you find it actually, you quite like 3D, it's gonna get you work. There's a lot more 3D work out there than 2D work. I will tell you that. You can do a lot more with 3D. There's a lot more job opportunities, not just in games. There's a lot more job opportunities for 3D artists. I think it's fun. It's just cool. So I could take this and I could make it into something for a game. I could then take this, work on it a little bit more. I could take it to something that can get 3D printed. I've 3D printed countless things from just little experiments I've made inside Maya. I just converted into something that could be 3D printed. Tons of stuff you can do. Okay, so that's all the videos. Like I said, they're a bit fast, so don't worry about assimilating every last bit of information. Go through the video slow if you need to, whatever. But please, please, please do not come into class having not touched Maya in the next week. If you can't touch Maya in the next week, let me know, just so I'm aware. But it is very important for us to get into Maya as soon as possible. Cool, I'll see you soon.